in a way, in order to respect yourself, you have to be able to be strong enough to keep that line, if you will. That red line is your red line, and it's inside you. And the only time you know when something's been crossed is how you feel.
Hi, I'm Beth Bonness, host of the Thought Echoes podcast, where we explore how we engage with our thoughts and appreciate their ripple effects and entanglements, especially with those we love and interact with the most. In this episode, I have an intimate conversation with social entrepreneur, philanthropist, and author Marcy Syms. We talk about respect, which Marcy says is a missing ingredient in today's workplace, whether in a family business, corporate America, or the nonprofit world, and sometimes in our personal relationships. Marcy shares how family stories plant seeds and how they echo throughout our lives. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you, Marcy, for joining today. I would love to start with what inspired you after all you've done to finally write a book?
Well, it always takes just one thing in my experience that acts as the tipping point. And for me, the tipping point was talking to a classroom of Marcy Syms Business School students, which I usually do at least once a year. And I give a lecture about the business, etc. And I looked out at these really attractive, smart faces, but they all looked like they were deer in headlights. They didn't know who Marcy Syms was. So I thought, Marcy, before it gets too late for you to write a book, I think you need to write a book and put down some of the facts about Cy, my father, and Syms, the company, and why he got to be what he became. And when I handed that in, 60 pages of it to Kensington Publishing House, which has been fabulous to work with, they didn't respond to me in a very long time. And then they said, we think we would like you to write this book, but we'd like it to be more of a book from your point of view, in your voice. And we'd really like it to be an inspirational business book because we find this such an inspirational story. So that's how the journey began. It took me 3 years to write it. I wrote one other book, and it was published back in 1992. And that took me 4 years to write while I was working as a president and chief operating officer. And that book was really a research book. In this book, I have no footnotes. It's all putting all of it down about my dad, about the company, about being a woman, about being the one of the youngest women to be president of an IPO on the New York Stock Exchange, and oftentimes the only woman in a room. And what that was like, what I learned from it, and how I transitioned after leaving a business that really was my full identity. It had my name and it was my family, and how I transitioned into the other part of my life, what we call the fourth quarter, if you will, and found inspiration in my fourth quarter.
How did you come up with the theme of respect in terms of finding a red thread throughout all the different aspects of what, you have experienced?
It didn't jump out at me right away. But as I told the story of why I decided to work with my dad, and I will share that, try to make it brief. It's really cinematic. I was working in my dream job as the assistant to the president of a radio station, and I was producing his radio show plus being his assistant, which meant getting coffee and everything else, which was fine. I loved the job. He gave me an assignment. The assignment was to look at the engineering schedule. We were a union engineering company, and I looked at it, and I had some understanding of scheduling from my dad, talking to him over the years about scheduling in retail stores. And I gave it a shot. And when I handed it in to my direct boss, the president of the radio station, he said, Marcia, I don't have time for this right now. Why don't you just give it to Dennis, our VP? I gave it to Dennis, the VP. And about 3 weeks later, the president calls me in and says, I'm still waiting to see your revision or suggestions for this engineering schedule. And I said, well, but I gave it to VP named Dennis. And he said, well, what are you saying? I said, I'm saying that I did the assignment. I don't know what he gave you. And he showed it to me, and it was exactly what I had done, but without my name on it. And I said, that's mine. And he looked at me and said, what are you saying Dennis did? And I immediately changed course. And I said, I must be mistaken. And I left the office. And unfortunately, Dennis must have been confronted by his boss and my boss. And when my boss left to join the Voice of America in DC, Dennis was left in charge. And Dennis walked into my office up 2 or 3 weeks after, closed the door, swiveled the chair around, pushed his leg over it like he was in an OK corral. And he looked at me and he said, Marcy, what do you really want here? And I don't know, I really must have been taken over by Bette Davis or Joan Crawford, the two early heroes of my black and white TV $1 million movie days. And I said, your job. And he said, you're fired. And he left, I closed the door and I continued. I just started crying and continued to cry for like, I don't know how long it was. And then I called my dad and I told him what happened. And he said, now will you come work for Sims? No, he said, work with me. And I said, no, no, I'm not ready. But what I thought at that very moment, I know my father respects me. I know he sees me. I know he's going to consider what I say in a way that I will feel heard.
Mm.
And, the radio station job was not my first job out of college. It was my third of any significance. And I had already had experiences where, I mean, if the laws were set in those days, two of the guys I worked with would be in jail. I mean, you get to a point where you just don't feel respected. And since that was the main reason I wanted ultimately at the end of the day to work with my father, that's why I chose respect as the running theme throughout, certainly throughout all of my life.
Wow, that's a powerful story. And I'm sure a lot of women can identify with that in one way, shape, or, form in terms of not feeling respected, however that came across. Uh, when you talk about how you had to, with your dad, talk more about your dad, because there are things in working with a family, and I was the oldest six girls, construction
Oh,
company.
I'm the oldest of six.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
And I did not want to work with my father. It was a construction company, and I went into computer science. So I did not have the same, I had the same vibe from him, but a different vibe from him. And I would say that I didn't have that respect moment until much later. Not much later, but after I decided to go into computer science and whatnot. But regardless, can you talk about how the story of your dad and kind of family business and how you are yourself or can make your way in a family business and all that? It's complicated. It's a big question. But can you talk about that in terms of you and your dad in the family business where you could be you?
Yes. And my first book, Minding Your Business and Keeping It in the Family, was how I explored some of those questions very seriously, Beth. I mean, that really weighed on me. How do you make the right decision joining the family business? I put it off for a long time. I would say, going back to your story, that Once you acquired the expertise of computer science, you then had something to join your father's company with that was a value added. I decided after my experience of media buying and planning and working in media that I had a value added for him. And it wasn't until that point that I felt I was ready to get the respect that I would have to earn the hard way every day from all of the non family people that I was going to work with, and also from the family members who are already working there. So you had the opportunity, being a trained IT person, I had the opportunity, being a trained media person, to bring something to the business that they didn't have. That's number one. And number two really has to do with the experience of working for other bosses. I understood that bosses are difficult. The relationship between bosses and employees is fraught with misunderstanding, with conflicts that cannot necessarily be spoken about, and with a whole slew of things that have to do with your childhood anyway. Whether it's your father or a non-father boss or a mother or a cousin or an uncle or someone you never saw before in your life, the authority figure, the person you have to take direction from, the person who you might have the responsibility for something to get done, but they have the authority.
Mhm.
So you are dealing with a very parent child kind of situation emotionally anyway. So when I joined my dad and considered all of this, I started with a 3 month plan, and he agreed. I was going to work for 3 months. It was going to be a trial period, and this is what I expected that I could do. I worked on a store opening and was involved with the media planning in a new market for the Sims store where they had never heard of the word Sims, didn't know anything about us. And I said, at the end of 3 months, we'll reconvene and we'll see if this is working for both of us. Well, you know, get to the end of the story, I had a ball. I just loved every minute of it, and I loved working with him. I really did. I mean, we had started with respect, but there was also this recognition that he had and I had, that I had certain natural things that I went to in a problem situation, and he had certain things that he naturally went to. And guess what? They kind of complemented each other. Now, I certainly had to do a lot of growing, and I did. I took classes at night, I took classes in textiles and retail math and real estate and all those things to catch up. But it was never, there was never conflict unless it was a business decision. And we certainly didn't always agree on business things.
When you commented about bringing something extra to the business in terms of coming back, I do remember there were um, peers who were guys who
Yeah,
were going to naturally follow on in their, what lawyers and whatnot. And it's like, it's like I wanted to make my own way, prove that I could make my own way rather than be assumed that, well, you didn't do anything. You just followed along with the recipe that was already there. So
right.
I haven't thought of that in a very long time. So
Yeah,
there was an amount of proving myself, away from other reasons that I left, which had to do with the Midwest versus the West Coast. But from the family situation, I totally get that. When you talk about inherited the podcast is about thought echoes, and we briefly shared how I've been fascinated with not only the echoes that we personally have, and you touched on it when you talk about childhood, in terms of those echoes come at us whether we want them or not, and we pass them on. And we have echoes that it's not all about us and the echoes affecting us. It's we do things that affect other people. So being in such close proximity with what you inherited in your ecosystem of your family, talk to us about, I love the story about your grandmother. Tell me about your grandmother and how that seed was planted. It sounded like it was an early seed that stuck. It was
It
watered.
was. It was a very early seed. My being the oldest of six, like you, I saw my mother pregnant every 2 years. So by the time I was 12 and seeing my mother twice suffer pretty severe postpartum depression, when they really didn't call it anything except getting over the blues. And my grandmother used to come and live with us in what I thought was a beautiful big house, but it was a house with one bathroom for all of these people. So I got to spend a lot of time with my grandma because she and I used to stay up late, and she taught me how to play canasta. So I think I might have been the youngest person in the neighborhood who knew how to play canasta. But she also told me stories of her past, and it came out loud and clear because she told me this story several times in various versions. But as a young immigrant girl, she was not allowed to start school until they were forced to send her to school because it was the law. She was living in Philadelphia in a Romanian community, and everyone was put to work right away. She finally, by the time she was in her early to mid 20s, I'm not sure when because they thought she was going to be an old maid because she didn't get married until she was 26. Um, she became a salesperson in a shoe store, and then she became the assistant manager in the shoe store. And she told me the story of how she dealt with the customers, how she put shoes on the ladies who came in, every detail, and with such pride. And she also ended most of the stories about this time in her life with, Marcy, never be dependent on someone else for your income. And it was, I mean, it was an early message of feminism,
Mhm.
but it was certainly to me, as I saw my mother, who was a professional singer before she got married. She had appeared on a radio show on her own in New York when she was 16, and she was a featured entertainer on two New York radio stations. So when she met my dad, who had just gotten out of the army, had the GI Bill to go to, like all the white men then. They were so lucky. We changed American economy forever with all the entrepreneurs that got their kickstart with the GI Bill. And it was just her story. I just saw it all around me. I saw it in the Yonkers neighborhood where I grew up, and the women who were so smart and playing mahjong one night a week and frustrated during the day and not having an outlet for any of their creativity other than jello molds and performing in the church, talent show. It was just everywhere, and it really informed me and my decisions.
How did you, because the expectations, I identify with the mom being pregnant every couple years, and I do, and large family that was all in Milwaukee, which is where we're from in Wisconsin. So there are five brothers, six brothers. I mean, six kids in my dad's side. So I mean, families
Mm.
were 10 to 12. I mean, big families, big families. But the expectation, I too got a message from my mom, which was that um, not to be dependent on somebody else. But at that point, she was, I mean, I graduated in 1980, so a little bit later you, but not that much. And it was you went to college because if something happened to your husband. So the expectation that I was going to get married, have babies, stay at home was very prevalent, which is, and my dad was a reinforcer of that. So in addition, I picked computer science because Marquette University didn't have it. I tried to
Ah,
find something that was not in Milwaukee, and it was in Madison, which wasn't that far. But that's part of my movement was to move away from those Midwest expectations that were really heavy. And you don't want to make somebody wrong, but it's like, I don't want the jello. I don't want the jello to use that. So, with your grandmother having that, your father being very supportive, your mother being very uh, of her time,
And
with all
over
the
her head.
kids and all
Yeah.
her friends. How did you balance those expectations that you kind of grew up? They seem like they're conflicting rather than complementary.
I think they probably were. And in my mind, I think the way that I handled it was to remind my mother and father when I made decisions that were not in keeping. And when I went to college, I had to come back because of illness. And even though I got into a school that I wanted to once I had to return, I didn't go there because they didn't have a dorm room for me. So I compromised and went somewhere else. And then when I wanted to go to grad school, and my father said, I think you've had enough schooling. And I said, I'll find another way to do it then. And he said, no, no, that's, he, after a while, gave in. I found that being more confident with them was in their insecurity as parents and being overwhelmed by having five other children to deal with. I found that, as long as they didn't have to pay too much of attention to me, I was well off in that regard. And I remember when I moved in with the man that I lived with without marrying him, and I was a sophomore in college, and my father said to me, and he was a Sikh Indian, okay?
Mm.
Um, and my father said, if you make this decision, Marcy, I think I'm going to have to disown you.
Mm.
And I don't know what came over with me. It was kind of like that moment with Dennis in the office when I became Bette Davis. Well, she came up again and she said, Dad, you can't disown me. We love each other too much. Don't be ridiculous. And that ended it. I mean,
Mm.
he didn't visit us for 6 months, but he did get over it. And I think it helped that, he took off his turban, cut his hair, and converted to Judaism.
Oh, that might have had something to do. That might have had something to do with it.
So I tell you, the moments that have, I don't get me wrong, sometimes that Bette Davis leads me down places I go, what the hell am I doing here? But there are some times where it also works. And I think um, showing a kind of gritty confidence is hard to resist.
Mm, mm. No, that's a great story. Can you, shifting a little bit with the respect through the work and your dad with that story, can you talk about some of the caregiving and the illness that you were able to
Sure.
use that and have that carry through?
Yes. Well, being the oldest and having a mom who often was not up to the task at hand, I really did do a lot of caregiving as a kid. I mean, no joke. I get asked, so what did you like to do as a little girl? I said, who knows? I was babysitting. I mean, that was the task at hand. I didn't have a Barbie doll, and it wasn't like that. And it wasn't until really I got to college, thank the Lord, that I really started investigating things that were of interest to me, or things that had been of interest to me, but I really didn't have the presence of mind nor the space or time to pursue them.
Mhm.
Um, so I got off track.
We were talking about respect through caregiving
Oh,
and
yes.
illness, and yes,
I
you were
got
doing
caught in
fine.
that.
You were doing
Yeah.
fine.
So, looking at the caregiving as an older child, it was almost natural, if you will, for me as my younger siblings became adults. And two of them were afflicted with particular illnesses that were pretty lifelong. And then when my father working as he did and his life, and my mother, who had moved to Florida, I was by default, by habit, and by necessity for there to be someone for them, became caregivers for them.
Mm.
And both were people who were um, able to find communities where they could live. One was my sister was a schizophrenic, and she had it in adulthood as well. And whenever she stopped her medication, it didn't work. And she was not able to support herself consistently and all those things. And then one of my brothers who um, had severe diabetes was really not able to continue working either. And both of them died young. I mean, they were in their early 60s. And I was the last person either one of them had contact with.
Mm-hmm.
I unfortunately have some crappy genetic things health wise. And two other of my siblings died of heart attacks. My sister died of a heart attack at 37. And my brother Stephen, who I was very close to, who was next in age, died at 45. And so I literally starting out the oldest of six, and I've lost four of my younger siblings.
Jeez.
So, and now I have a 96-year-old mother, 97, excuse me,
Wow. Happy birthday.
97-year-old mother. Yeah. And, and that caregiving, because she never did want to come back from Florida, but that caregiving has to do with me going to Florida. I try to go as infrequently as possible. But I do want to check up on her and her aides, who managing aides is a job also.
Yeah, especially through COVID. Mom uh, didn't make it to 97, but she made it to 91. But doing all that with COVID from a distance was, and she did not want to move out of that 4,500 square foot house that the six kids were in. And she was,
Uh,
her area that she could live in got smaller and smaller and smaller.
yeah,
But trying to honor that autonomy, but, worrying about her at the same time. So,
yeah,
ay, 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 ay. The last question I was going to ask you, or the next question I was going to ask you is that when you look at respect, it's usually talking about respect for others, and it's kind of you want to get respect, but it's between two people. Can you talk about the respect, the internal respect? And you've kind of touched on it a little bit in terms of, who showed up when to kind of, stand your ground. But can you talk about when did you find a time that you were actually delineating that in terms of it's not just other people respect, I have to have respect for myself too?
yeah. It's a challenge. I don't think that it's a clear path. I don't think it's linear, and I don't think it has to do with years you're alive. I think it really has to do when you're at the point where you're able to see it. You're able to see the connection with how you're projecting yourself, that you are a caregiver for first and foremost yourself. The tritest way of making this literal is what they tell you on an airplane. Remember to put the mask on yourself first, and then you can help others. Respect is exactly the same, exactly the same. But it is not that easy to see, nor often, particularly for caregiving women, is it that easy to internalize and to make part of um, how you present yourself, how you enter a room, how you engage with friends, and probably most importantly, how you engage with loved ones.
Mm.
Because in my experience, it's the people you love and you least want to disappoint that are the ones you have to really know those respect lines. You asked me the question about family business, and one of the challenges is understanding that there is separation, understanding that there are barriers to privacy, that there are barriers to secrets that you have between you and you, and so that you're not subsumed by the family drama and the family expectations. And in a way, in order to respect yourself, you have to be able to be strong enough to keep that line, if you will. That red line is your red line,
Mhm.
and it's inside you. And the only time you know when something's been crossed is how you feel. So you have to get your feelings up to how does a person who's respected feel about this?
Do you have, I've got two granddaughters, and I am enjoying watching my daughter model and feels good things that she grew up with, but there are things that we didn't know back then and that's
Yeah.
different. And so big feelings, and it's okay not to be disappointed that something didn't work out. You don't have to snap to being a good girl and get over it. And so watching this 3 and 4 year old kind of process these big feelings and going off and being by herself because I need some alone time to process is huge. We never would have been, in kind of that environment. So, do you have any advice, kind of I'll say, for parents of young kids or teenagers, in terms of how you can, modeling is one, in
Yes.
terms if you respect yourself and you show that and you explain that, but how you can encourage parents to do that for their kids?
It's so difficult because it has to do with your face and how you react to things and how quickly you talk and how much you want to save them from pain and anguish. And it's really hard. In watching it with non-children, but with adults in the workplace, I would say listening,
Mhm.
by active listening without judgment, is the first step, because people can discover on their own what respect is. They can, because it feels so good. They will discover it on their own if it's not suppressed, if it's not overridden, if it's not made to be something you're shameful of. Um, I think that would be my number one suggestion. Really active listening and bite your tongue.
Well, I think that that's whether it's for kids or parents or adults, I think all of us doing more active listening so that we can
Yeah.
give some space around processing. Because I know with my husband, I'll say something off. He's like, I'm processing. And I'm thinking, how come I don't get the time to process? It's like, well, you don't give your time. I don't give myself the same respect for me to process because I feel like I need to give an answer right away, kind of thing. And so I've adopted that moniker. It's like, I'm processing, before I can come back.
Good. And they accept that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, 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 which is all good, which is all good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I'll have all the information on link about the book and about all the good work you've been doing. Can you give one piece of advice if you were going to leave everybody with one piece of advice in terms of what you would offer having to do with respect? What would that one piece of advice be?
Don't compromise it away. It's not something that can be compromised. It's too valuable. It's too critical. It's the foundation of every relationship you have in your life that you have trusting between people. Respect is foundational.
That's that's wonderful. That's a great soundbite. That's a drop the mic moment. What is people can find stuff about you on your website and whatnot, but what's the next project you're doing? You're on a bunch of podcasts now promoting the book.
Yes, I am, which is so much fun because in 2013, I actually trademarked an expression, which was changing the conversation. It's trademarked. You can't take it anymore. And I was going to start my own podcast, I thought at that time. But what happened was I got myself hoodwinked, and it's something I've been passionate about all my life. I started working with the ERA Coalition in 2013. And I'm proud to say we got the 38, we got the 38th state, and we have really passed the Equal Rights Amendment already. It should be part of the Constitution, but we have some very snarly obstructionists.
You are very
Yeah.
enjoyable.
Good. Yeah, I had a good time too. All
Good,
right.
good. Okay, take care. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the Thought Echoes podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend. It helps get the word out. Until next time, keep exploring the echoes that shape your world.